Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Today I will be speaking about, in my opinion, a very important subject, which is the open access to public data. First, I will try to do a quick definition of what that means, and then I will go on why it is important, especially in time of crisis, and then I will go over the state of open data in Lebanon. Open data is, by definition, any information that public institution and sometimes private institution that they produce, and they are, if they are open, they should be open, readily to be consulted, reused, analyzed, deciphered, and getting out of it some added value. This is in the modern view of open data, it's a public good that should be available to the public at large, and especially to the knowledge industry. When we say knowledge industry, we're meaning, university, think tanks, and journalism. It is considered open, and this is a very important aspect, because many, if you want, governments and institutions, especially public ones, do not abide by these rules. It is considered, data is considered open when we can use it. That means it couldn't be in PDF format, for example. When it's shareable, when you can share it as much as you want, when it is comparable and reusable. So, and especially timely and accessible. And I will get back to that when we speak about open data for election, which is a very timely topic at the moment. Why is open data important, and why I will be spending some time on that? Public data is very important. First of all, in Lebanon currently, we are having, it's obvious, we're having lots of difficulties of doing any kind of reforms. At any time when one or other pressure group is able to push for a kind of reform, usually you hit some kind of what you call in France chasse gardée, which is the clientelistic, if you want, protected area where most political parties have, without naming any names. We know who the electricity is for, we know the financial institution, we know for example, the communication sector. Each political party or sectarian political party has, if you want, a small piece of the pie, and they are milking it, and they are totally against any kind of reform, because any kind of reform will stop their benefit from that. And the last 3 years, despite the crisis, despite COVID, despite all what we have suffered, practically there have been no reform made in any of the urgent sectors. And the fact that until now we still haven't had any kind of international aid because we have failed to make the reforms, shows us how bad the situation is. So where does public data come in? Public data is one of these reforms that is pretty, let's call it low-key, that does not directly target the chasse gardée, the little protected areas of the sectarian parties. And you can start it as a building block on which you can start building a scaffolding of reforms. For example, I will get to that in more details, but one of the, for me, most prominent examples of such effort is Ghirbal initiative, where they've put the most of the countries or public data that are available in a digital, easy to access format, which is, we're talking about, for example, the budget. Why is that important? Because it allows academicians and especially investigative journalists to go in and look and start seeing where the corruption is. It is practically known that most states or government use make the access to public data very hard in an effort to make any kind of investigation, any kind of seeing if there is corruption here or there, making it hard to stop any kind of accountability. Therefore, it is very important to start small, but trying to ship away from the government or the state hold over public data, making it available to the public. That's, if you want, your first point why public data is very important. Second, and as I have been saying, public data is critical in the fight against corruption. But not only that, it helps the government become more efficient. So we talked about corruption. The second point is it makes the government efficient. When you have accountability, when you have someone that is looking over your shoulder, you tend to spend less and to spend more wisely. Not only that, having open data makes politics more universal. It allows people and the common public to look in, to feel more involved in decision making, and allow them a bigger say in the government and how it is performing, and in politics in general, which we will get to that also later on, especially in times of election and politics. It allows for a larger participation of the people when they feel that they are part of the whole political process. Lastly, why is it important? We are now going into, and I'm sure in other sessions this has been talked about in more details, we are entering a different phase in human evolution, talking about artificial intelligence and deep learning. And in this new age, if you want, oil, as old oil, now data is the new oil. The more data you have as a country or as an institution, the better you are able to extract information, the more you are able to perform, and the more innovation you are able to create. Moreover, open data has become an infrastructure. It enables the economy. And I always like to say this example. We were once in a conference, and we were with one of the large alternative medias in the Arab world. I think it was Arij or someone similar. And they were telling us how part of their revenue are being generated by just allowing for all the comments, the public comments that they have. There is a company that takes these comments and use them to translate and to check their algorithm of translation. And lots of companies pay a lot of money. And I'm talking about a tiny example in a very specific industry. So imagine what you can do with other kind of data. At any point, please feel free to ask questions, and there will be a full Q&A at the end. Finally, and this is for me, especially at this time, I feel that open access to public data has a very important role to play. One, in time of crisis, like we said, in fighting corruption and increasing transparency and efficiency. But more importantly, open data is critical to allow participation of all the different groups of society. especially in regard to new parties that favor youth and women. Why? Because the new emerging parties do not have institutional memory. They have just been created. They lack the institutional memory and experience of large traditional parties who have been doing politics for the past 20, 30, 40 years. These traditional parties have access to trained individuals. They have access to treasure trove of personal and election data that they can use to and analyze, to target, to pinpoint where they should spend their money for maximum effort. New emergent party have no such data, unfortunately. And so having public data, which is normal and it should be allowed to everyone, accessible to everyone, would give or at least level the playing field in politics and in election and give these new emergent party a real fighting chance. Lebanon, although it seems small, but Lebanon is a large country, and there is lots of areas, and most of the votes are spread out. And just knowing a small part of the urban landscape and urban people who are living there is not enough to win an election. You need to be present in the cities, but you also need to be present in the periphery. And this is, again, where you have a lower education level, lower wealth level, and people are a little bit more traditional. I may be generalizing, but practically most research tend to say that. Again, we're talking about 70%. So connecting with these people is very difficult. And especially if you do not know who they are, you do not know how they think, and what are their most impressing matters. And therefore, having data about them, how they voted before, will give you what is their demographical, if you want, breakdown. Knowing all of this information will make it much easier to talk to them, to attract them, and to remove any kind of, if you want, misconception or preconceived negative conception of, especially when we're talking about new parties. How are we faring on open data? In the Arab world, I just pulled a few numbers just to show the state of open data, and then we will dive into open data in Lebanon. In the Arab world, like in most, let's say, not fully democratic countries, governments prefer not to share their data. Again, for the reason we spoke about in the beginning. It allows them to better control. It allows them to evade any kind of accountability, and it allows them to keep business as usual, rather than to be beholden to their public through the media. And having access to open data, like we said, can allow for a larger academic and a larger, if you want, media and open, free speech in these countries, because there's more to talk about and more details, and the political discourse start becoming more serious and much more, if you want, professional. We, from what I see on TV and read in the media, in Lebanon and practically in most of the Arab world, people have an easy way of dealing with facts. Anyone can just say whatever they want, spew any kind of statistics, and practically you cannot know if this is true or not. Most of the articles in newspapers and on websites relate back to sources. and we all know how accurate that is. You can anyone can make up anything and say a close source to ex-politician, and this is why having open data makes this obfuscation of real information and of a real discourse much harder than it could be. In Lebanon, I'm sorry about the too much information. I will try to explain them in an easy way. In Lebanon, one of the main fight that took years led to the Access to Information Act, to the Access to Information Law, and in 2017. And this law created, if you want, a new legal framework that gave the public access to the right to access public information. And it tasked two large, if you want, scientific or research state institution with managing the whole thing. One is the National Council for Scientific Research, and the other one is the Central Administration of Statistics. The two are critically important in any kind of open data debate and repository. They have trove of information, and they were tasked with streamlining the whole process, creating a website, and making all their data open. Unfortunately, none of that has happened. Both institutions are severely underfunded, barely functioning. For example, the Central Administration of Statistics, which should now, in a time of economic financial crisis, be the most important state institute, and working with IMF and the Finance Ministry to get the information and to try to find what is the problem and to fix it. The CAS, as we say it, the Central Administration of Statistics, one rarely publish any official numbers. It is always when it publishes numbers that are 6 months old. For example, inflation. In our almost hyperinflationary situation, this becomes ridiculous. And three, even these two institutions that were tasked with applying open data for other state institutions are not implementing the law that has been demanded of them. So if the two who should be leading everyone into making data more open data are not doing their job, there is the reasons. I mentioned one of them. They are underfunded, understaffed. They lack the technical knowledge. Yes, true, but that does not change the fact. Moreover, there have been in the law a clause that allowed institution, organization, and even individual to ask any state, organization, or institution for information, and they are forced to give the answer in 15 days. The Ghirban initiative have been for the past few years trying that law, and out in 2018, out of 133 demands for public institution, only 34 responded, and only 19 of them responded within the 15 days deadline. In 2019, it was a little bit better, but this does not change the fact that public data in Lebanon is very, very, very hard to get. So, what do we do? The idea is to start working on initiatives. Before I get that, I need also to talk a little bit about the flip side of public data. And this is another problem in Lebanon and should be addressed. And I think SMAX and there are several other organizations that are working heavily on this because it's very, very dangerous and totally unacceptable. The problem is when we talk about public data and not making available to the public, most government officials start saying, no, we cannot share, there are lots of personal information and it's dangerous to share them, and all of that. True, that is a valid, if you want, a valid concern. Unfortunately, when they go to their different parties, most of the political actors in Lebanon use and abuse open data for election, for outreach, for you name it. The latest, and in a series of scandals in this regard, is what is happening with the expats who register to vote outside Lebanon. There have been many reports, and some of them verified by independent organizations, that 15 to 30 minutes after you register online, you get a call from a political party, and they start asking you, who are you going to vote for, and why, and just getting data. It seems, we cannot be sure again because we don't have access to open data, that certain political parties are abusing the databases of the foreign ministry with all the expats registered, and using them for their own political and electoral goals. Because we are living in a world that most of our data is now online, Lebanon is lagging. We have no or very few privacy law with data. You cannot, for example, like in Europe, ask any online company that have been collecting data to remove you from their database. There is one minister who offered to sell Lebanese public data, names and other information, in order to make money for the state, which is a breach of privacy laws and rights of unimaginable consequences. And there is also a lack of specific laws about minors' data protection in schools, vaccination, health, and education, especially for minors, which is an even worse breach. This is not to say that we should not open public data. On the contrary, this is only to say that whenever we're talking about open data, there must be guidelines, there must be rules and regulation and laws that protect the people, but at the same time allow for all the benefit that I have been talking about. So what do we do? I think I'll get to your question. I just need a few more minutes, and then I can go into detail with your questions. So what do we do? Okay, so the government is not, although there's a law, the government does not care, is not sharing its public data. What can be done? What can be done is to create small initiatives. Anyways, big reforms do not work in Lebanon. We've seen that. So let's start small. Let's start from a bottom-top approach. I'm going to overview like 3 or 4 initiatives for public data that I think have been successful. One is what I am personally doing. Following the 2018 election, again, I was faced with the same thing everybody faces. I could not get the raw electoral results in a machine-readable, open, and friendly format. The government, the Ministry of Interior, published the result, the raw detailed result by sect, by gender, and in each ballot box. They publish them in PDF. So I think most of you know, with PDF you cannot do anything. So what we did was to we took the PDF, we converted them. We had Arabic and Latin scripts, so it made automatic conversion a nightmare. And so we had to go through each line and convert them. It was we got funding and we started working on them, and the data is now public. Again, anyone who would like to have access, feel free to email me. There's my email, the email of the NGO now, and at the end there's also my own personal email. Then the funder liked the idea, and then we started doing the earlier years, 2009 and 2005. These were not present in any electronic formats, so we had to go back to the official books. And we then had a data entry expert that just typed the data, and then we had 3 levels of editing on top of them to make sure the data validation. So, okay, why is that important? Again, this data allows all alternative parties to have access to what traditional party already have access to. And with their limited resources, they are able to better get results, and all of that. And it is a right of all Lebanese people to know that in their hometown, who voted, how did this hometown vote, how the percentages were divided, and compare them for the past years. It is public data after all. This is, for example, the kind of analysis that can be done with such data: desegregation by sect, by gender, by region, longitudinal studies over a couple of election cycles, seeing, for example, if gender plays a role in decision. If there's a woman running, would she get more votes from women, or would women vote more to men or less? Urban versus periphery question. It's open for such analysis that are, again, very important for academicians and the public and journalists. We go to another initiative that I really like, which is the Ghirbal initiative. The idea behind Ghirbal was to make all public data that is published, but to make it available in a easy to read, easy to access, interactive format. You can check the website, and this is, for example, part of what they offer. We are almost talking daily on the foreign currency reserves of the BDL. You have now a very significant and frightening graph that shows you how they grew and how they in the last 2 years how they fell. They have the budget divided and organized by ministries, by institution. You have the number of people who are traveling to and from Lebanon. There is most of the data that the Lebanese state produces, which is small, unfortunately, but it is available on that website in a very, again, interactive, with lots of graphs and in a very detailed manner. There is also a third initiative that is called Open Data Lebanon. It's a data aggregator website where they just publish any reports, information, studies made by the government, but also by the different NGOs, UN agencies, and all of that. Again, it is a very important, if you want, tool and library that it's very helpful for academic institutions, students, journalists, and all of that, because, and this I will get back to in the recommendation part, in Lebanon, unfortunately, we do not have, people do not like to work together, so everybody is doing is work on one side, and sometimes there's duplication of work and all of that. It's founded by Wissam Samouri, who is a professor at AUB, and Mario Matar, sorry. This is their website, and you can see there is many different subcategories, and again, with lots of information that is publicly available. Last one, and for me, it is one of the most interactive and most amazing tools. Unfortunately, I think because it was too dangerous, it was closed down by the state a few years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. It just put the business registry, yani all the different companies in Lebanon, it just put them on this interactive website, and it showed who owned what. So you can go see who owns Solidaire, you can go see who own, I don't know, what, any other company. And you can click, for example, for a name of a politician, and it will show you all the different companies this politician owns. This, for me, was one of the most important application of open data in an interactive. It was an anti-corruption tool par excellence. Unfortunately, it has been closed by a judicial order, and I can't seem to access it. I tried yesterday, and I think I will try to see if it is accessible from outside of Lebanon. Unfortunately, I think they closed down. It's a very, for me, it was one of the best examples of how open data can be used to fight corruption. So, at the end, and I will then go on and start answering your question. So, what do we do? First, we in Lebanon need to be part of this new revolution, new technology. We cannot miss that train. It probably will allow us to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the Middle East, help in reforms and in reconstruction after, hopefully, we start moving away. As I said, forget working with the government and pressuring them. It is important to pressure them, but start with small initiatives, small community projects that aggregate data, that put them and make them available for anyone in a very easy to read and interactive way. Next, and I will try to do that. I'm in contact with most of the different projects I said, who were to create a kind of a poll, and where all the different parties that are working, the parties, organization, NGOs, universities that are working on open data come together, make sure there's no duplication of work, exchange expertise and knowledge, and try to create what we call not a watchdog, but a platform like Open Lebanon Data that Yes, great. So I was talking about creating a pool where all these efforts are, if you want, put together, make sure there's no duplication of work, and make sure that larger goals are made, and use it as a watchdog to work to see the Lebanon's ranking, and then you can compare it to other different countries. I am unable to move the slide. If one of the co-hosts could do that for me. Take presenters. Okay, that's it. I got it. And finally, these are more details. I can go about them if you want, but let me first start answering questions. So I will go into the chat. Not a question, just an observation. 10 years ago, I could take similar open data, but now much more negative about because the lack of government to open while citizens are forced to share everything. I agree with you. There are a negative and a positive aspect to it, and there is a need definitely to and I talked about it in my presentation, to make guidelines, rules, and regulation to make sure we do not go like what happened with Cambridge Analytica and what Facebook has been doing. I agree totally, but at the same time, it is the future. We cannot just close our eyes and sit in the corner. I feel like there's a cart before the horse syndrome with this talk. How can we begin to talk about public open data in a region of the world where the very concept of a modern accountable state is not yet achieved, let alone implemented? Not sure what we are talking about here, with all due respect. Sure, that's your opinion, and I accept it. Well, then, if we follow your logic, then we need to leave, and I refuse to leave. So for me, as I said, if trying reforms from the top doesn't work, we can try reform from the bottom. In my very small part, I believe I made a small change. Ghirbal has made a big change. Open Data Lebanon, if we feel that there's no possibility of change, you may be right, by the way, but I'm stubborn sometimes. How can we make sure that the election and votes are not sorted by the political parties if the election are administered by the Ministry of Interior? This is another aspect. Party monitors. The Lebanese law allow each and every party that is participating in election to be in the electoral room while people are voting and at the end. So the idea is to train these people and make sure that they are there, and they are there when the votes are being counted to make sure nothing happens. Sasha, why do initiatives like Open Government Partnership have success stories and examples from Mexico and Ukraine and basically from everywhere except MENA? Could you please share the website link? I don't know which website, but I can share everything. Just please type them. Again, what's the site name for anti-corruption tool? The site which connects to unfortunately this one. Yes. Yalla, 1 second. It's Shimam Lim. The way I wrote it, Shimam Lim. Let me just get you. I will get it, but just give me 2 seconds. Open data and open government is not necessarily the same. Yes. Open government is way too far from us. I'm trying to get open public data. But there is a fair amount of overlap. In my opinion, open government is basically an Obama initiative in other China. Open data came from NGOs and citizens. Website links, sorry to clarify from the example. Yeah. 1 second. Any other question? Feel free. So. This is the first. Okay. The Ghirbal initiative. To Lebanon and open data. Data Lebanon. Is there any institution, public or private, that tracks public opinion in Lebanon? Sorry. There is no public institution, to my knowledge, that track public opinion. There are plenty of private institutions that tracks them. and they are usually paid for, and they take lots and lots of money. And unfortunately, some of them are not very professional, and they tend to steer the data and the result in favor of whoever is paying them for these surveys. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will finish up with my second list of recommendation, and I think that would be it. Okay, so more detailed recommendation, because this is kind of my field in addition to academic teaching and have doing the different projects. One of them is 128 Lebanon. So for me, again, as I said, open data is the future, and we cannot have reforms, especially in a third world country or a developing country, without having access to open data. Therefore, one is, and I think this also goes back to the question of one of the attendees, that we need open data guidelines, again, to stop any kind of overreach, and to start forcing the government at least to have the ground to push the government for more. Although I said that, forget about the government, but at the end of the day, we live in a society. So this is needed. The access to information law is good, but it's now 4 years old. It needs more effort, maybe a bit of renovation and changes. There is also a need, and this is, I hope, in the next election, we will, the Ministry of Interior need to be pressured into publishing all data of election rapidly, transparently, and in a machine-readable format. يعني Excel, CVS, SQL, whatever format you want to name it, but it has to be an open format and a machine readable that you can put into a program and start getting to analyzing it. I didn't speak about this a lot, but yes, you can have the law and you can have a very strong law, but at the same time, the state organization and institution is made out of persons. It's made out of people, and these people need to be trained. Their skill, they need to have an upskill. They need to understand what they are doing. They need to understand how to use these tools. Unfortunately, the public sector in Lebanon is not very modern. Therefore, there is a need to spend time, money, and effort on training the public sector. Lastly, and this I spoke about it, there's an urgent need to get all the different, and this, by the way, applied to most, if you want, NGO, non-governmental initiative project. Then we need to start creating national networks that unite the different projects and initiatives and try to push them together in towards definite goals, strengthening their effort, and creating these big poles that will shape the public discourse and the different public initiatives. These are the different references for the numbers and the quotes I've used. And finally, thank you. This is the main links for how to reach me personally and how to reach my website. Sasha said, I see very few example of regional of the country in each instance. I was and Yes, I agree. Thank you for sticking out with me and asking pertinent questions. I am I'm thinking of doing even more research on that, especially with the point that you just said. Why open data is not really in our region. We know why, but trying to get, is there any other initiative in other part of the region, and learning from similar small countries that were able to transform themselves through open data. And I didn't get to that because it's a whole different concept, getting to e-government. Someone, I think, spoke about open government, but I prefer the e-government, which is an even much more potent and strong weapon against corruption and clientelism. And I always like to speak about, take Estonia as an example. Go check what they were able to accomplish. The country started as a small country with corruption, bad neighborhood. They had Russia, and it was, and they had corrupt leaders. They came out of 50 years of communism, and they were very small, no natural resources. Maybe they were blessed that they didn't have sectarian differences, but they had ethnic problems. There is a large Russian community of Russian origin. And throughout e-government, by shifting the whole government institution into electronic format, now they do everything on the net, and they even started opening it up to outsiders. For example, now you can have create an international company based in Estonia with like 4 or 5 clicks on the website. You can create a bank account. Everything is online. So this will diminish clientelism and corruption in a crazy way. So for me, it is a very good way forward. Sure. Can we get around the government to block? I frankly, it started working and stopping, but I think the guy stopped it. If anyone who is listening now is not in Lebanon, could you please try and click on the website to see if it's working? I think Monica might be living outside Lebanon. But I feel e-government in Lebanon has been misinterpreted as digital transformation. Plus, we don't have sufficient data protection law. I agree, Sasha, completely. The website is reachable in Tunisia. You just tried it. Thank you very much, Sharif. So here you go. Yes, if you use a VPN, you can access. Excellent. So there is hope yet to catch all the corrupt people. Okay. Thank you. I really enjoyed sharing this with you. Please feel free to reach out for any further questions. And thank you, Brent and Nat, for organizing this. And thank you, Muhammad, for your help. And I think Sarah also.